Good evening. My name is Jerry Cochran, and I'd like to call the City of Pasco Planning Commission meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all those in attendance this evening and ask you to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, to begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Rosa Torres.
Present.
Mitchell Moffitt.
Present.
Paul Mendez.
Present.
Kim Lehrman.
Present.
Abel Campos, excused. Dana Crutchfield, excused. Rachel Teal.
Present.
Jay Hindler.
Present.
Jerry Cochran.
Present.
Mr. Chair, there are 7 members present, so we do have a quorum.
Thank you. The Planning Commission is an advisory board made up of volunteers appointed by the City Council. The purpose of the Planning Commission is to provide recommendations to City Council regarding changes to the city's comprehensive plan, land use updates, block grant allocations, and zoning code. The Planning Commission is tasked with considering the long-term growth and development of the community, the impact of land use decisions on the community, livability, economic opportunity, housing affordability, public services, and the environment. I'd like to remind the audience that tonight's proceedings are being broadcast live on the City of Pasco's Facebook page and on Charter Cable PSC Channel 191, and will be rebroadcast several times in the next month. This meeting is also being recorded, so you can watch it on the City of Pasco's website, which is pasco-wa.gov. Click on the video on demand and make your selection there. There are copies of the meeting agenda available on the back table, so you can follow along. And at this time, I'd like to ask that you silence your cell phone to prevent interruptions during our meeting. The operation of the Planning Commission is for those present. When you're given the opportunity to address the commission, please come forward to the podium, speak clearly into the microphone, state your name and city of address for our records. And before we begin, I need to remind the audience and the Planning Commission that Washington state law requires public meetings like the one being held this evening, not only to be fair, but also appear to be fair. In addition, Washington state law prohibits Planning Commission members from participating in discussions or decisions in which the member may have a direct interest or may be either benefited or harmed by the Planning Commission's decision. Any objection to any Planning Commissioner member hearing any matter on tonight's agenda needs to be aired at this time or it'll be waived. First, are there any Planning Commission members who have a declaration at this time regarding any of the items on the agenda? Let the record show there were no declarations. Second, is there anyone in the audience this evening who would object to any Planning Commission member hearing any of the items on the agenda? Hearing none, let the record show that there were no declarations. We as the Planning Commission need and value your input. It helps us to understand the issues more clearly and make better recommendations to City Council. Furthermore, in many cases, your input here at the Planning Commission meeting is your only opportunity to get your facts and opinions placed onto the official record the City Council will use to make its decisions. I encourage you to take full advantage of this opportunity. The first item or next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. We actually have 2 sets of meeting minutes. We'll start with the January 25th, 2023 agenda meeting minutes. This was mailed out ahead of time to commission members. If you have any questions at this time, this January 25th meeting minutes was updated to reflect Commissioner Crutchfield's comments. And I don't believe she's here tonight. So if there are any other questions or comments, we could entertain those now, or else I would entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
A motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Commissioner Torres has moved and Commissioner Moffitt has seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Let the record show that it passed unanimously. All right, the second set of minutes for our approval tonight is the Planning Commission meeting minutes from Thursday, February 16th, 2023. Again, this was mailed out, emailed, and provided ahead of time. If there are any questions or comments, otherwise I would also entertain a motion to approve these meeting minutes.
I so move.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Mendez. I second that.
Great. It's been moved by Commissioner Hendler and seconded by Commissioner Mendez. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Let the record show that it passed unanimously. All right, we have no old business, so we'll move right to the public hearing item. We have one item on the public hearing agenda tonight. It's a report on our consolidated annual plan evaluation report. I assume this is for the community block grant program. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commission. The item before you tonight is the last step in the CDBG grant cycle for program year 2022. There's a memo in your packet that goes into more detail. As a quick reference, the grant cycle begins in May. Public hearings are conducted in June and July, and recommendations are sent to Council for approval. During the program year, activities are carried out in accordance with the approved plan. 3 months after the end of the year, the CAPER, which is the Consolidated Annual Plan Evaluation Report, is due to HUD for reporting our progress and meeting the goals in the annual action plan. The next few slides very briefly summarize our performance in carrying out the goals and strategies in the 2022 annual action plan. Next. This screen summarizes budget to actual for the 2022 annual action plan goals, activities by goal, which are reported on the PRO2, which is in your packet. Goal number 1 is affordable housing. Goal 2, community and economic development. And goal 3 is homeless housing and priority public services. PRO2 shows that activities used of the budget was $603,000. PRO3 shows that all activities in 2022 were $5,022,224. This does include prior year's expenses as well as the Section 108 Peanuts Park project, which was a total of $3.7 million for the Section 108 loan that we received. As you can see, there are some low percentages. This is due to the City of Pasco not receiving the grant agreement until August of 2022, which means we were doing final draws in January of 2023, which are not reflected here as the reporting period is only from January to December of 2022. Next slide. This is just the graph presented on the previous, the other slide. Sorry. This graph just shows the data that was presented on the previous slide. Now, next slide. Reports budget to actual for accomplishments for 2022 activities only. Totals are reported through quarterly reports from the subrecipients, which include code enforcement with how many citizen cases were closed, the civic centers, senior centers, YMCA, the ARCA Tri-Cities, and the scholarship programs with respect to economic opportunity. Jobs, which normally are reported by Pasco Specialty Kitchen, are not reported this year as they did not apply for any of the 2022 funds. As far as businesses, the City of Pasco has a facade program which hasn't been utilized in the last several years, but currently has 2 facade projects which started in 2022 and will be completed in the next couple of weeks. Okay, and the last slide, my beneficiaries. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the next. Oh, yeah. So if you guys have any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for Ms. Webb?
Yeah, just a point of edification for those that are maybe listening to this. So, as you notice the numbers up there, the actual in a lot of cases exceeds what was proposed. But in the cases where we don't use the money that is given, which is very few, is that a use it or lose it, or does the city still get to retain that and use it at a later date?
So it just depends. So we have like a public works project that they're going to be expanding the Lewis Street for Second to Fifth with like sidewalks and benches and stuff. They haven't used that money in the last 3 years. That money still is allocated to them, and they will have up till 6 years to use that money, or HUD will then take it back from us.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commissioners?
Can we go back to the other slide with the dollar amounts and just kind of maybe walk a little bit through those? I think one more back. Yeah, kind of a similar question to Commissioner Moffett, like where, there's quite a bit of difference between the budget and the expenditures. Can you maybe give a little bit of context on maybe some high level reasons why that was?
So like with the public facility improvements, that was because we had a Section 108 loan, and it was $3.7 million. And so that money was budgeted in 2020, and it actually wasn't expended. So some of the budgeted to actual is because of prior year budget money that we have. And some of the projects just take a while for them to expend the money.
And then, so that one then just be carried over,
Yes.
so we can use it again, like you said
Yeah.
previously. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think sometimes too, we have a lot of things that don't align on the calendar year, and so the way we account for them messes up how it should look, and it's skewed because the reporting period doesn't match the execution period. So I think that's what I think we've seen before, and I know that even being on the board of some nonprofits, that we sometimes don't get our funding when they say they're supposed to provide it. So
Yeah.
not
and-
from you, but
Yeah, and last year HUD didn't give us our
Yeah.
agreement until August.
yeah, sometimes they're really
So-
late. So
And this year, just a couple weeks ago, we did get our funding letter, how much we're going to get, but then we were told in a meeting that they're hoping we'll have the agreements before August this year. So,
and I think that happens at the state and federal level all the time. So it's pretty.
yeah.
The one thing I was going to ask about is I was looking at, I think it's on page 3 and 4 of the Giganto report. This is more the bigger picture of the attainment of the goals. It's on the tables that you had on goal attainment.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed, like, if you think about, you look at the two kind of big ones, homeless intervention, public services, and increase and preserve affordable housing choices. Those are rather heavily executing. In fact, the one, affordable housing is 140% a goal, but I also noticed there's some low and zeros. And so what are the things like, are there strategies to kind of encourage more proposals or grant requests in the areas that we're under executing on goal attainment? Or is there a strategy we have, or is we just totally whatever people apply is what we have to go with kind of thing?
Pretty much it's whatever applications we get. We do send out, when we do the RFP in May, we do try to target people that we think will be spending the money, but if they don't apply, we can't obviously make them. And a lot of people defer from applying because HUD requires a lot of paperwork. You have to have a lot of documentation and stuff, so.
So you're saying some of them that are lower attainment are also more complicated?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The other thing is, I think when you present these to us earlier in the year, you always align them with the goal here
Yes.
that they're going to achieve. And maybe it's also us paying attention to, if we can, in some cases, prioritizing ones that are way under executing versus ones that are way over executing. But
Yes, and you guys have that authority. So
Yeah.
when we bring you the applications in June,
Yeah.
I always give you guys a copy of the applications. You guys get a copy of, what they're requesting, how much money we have to budget, and then we bring you back the staff recommendation, and you guys can always change that if there's another avenue that you would rather us
Yeah.
go.
I was just wondering if, and again, I'm open to other feedback from other commissioners. I was just wondering is, when you give these to us in June, if you could give us these percentage attainment numbers and goals as like part of the package, then we can say, oh, well, let's focus more on these if we have them, because we're 140% on this one, and maybe we can prioritize higher on some of the lower executing. But for me, this is the first time I realized how some of these goals were off. So.
Well, and those goals are actually for the 5-year consolidated plan, so you have to remember this started in 2020. So in 2024, we're actually gonna start creating our new plan, so that's why it's,
No, that's helpful. I just was curious if there's ways that we could better
Yeah.
make decisions based on where the goal attainments are.
Yeah.
So we could spread it out a little better.
yeah, no problem. I can.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners for staff on this?
This is Commissioner Lehrman.
Go ahead.
I apologize. I cannot see anyone's faces. Do you mind sharing out again your name that was speaking other than Commissioner Cochran?
Oh, it's Kristen Webb.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. You had mentioned about the difficulty that people have getting through the HUD process. If you waved on and you have more resources, is that one area that you could foresee that our community members and residents could use in receiving training or guidance in order to be able to get through the HUD process, in order to be able to apply for applications for housing?
Well, in our packet, when we send it out, it actually does have requirements. So if they are not a 501(c), they cannot apply for these monies.
So you feel like that's the number one thing that holds them back more so than the process? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, it's actually a little bit of both. We've actually had other applicants who have applied in the past, and because once they've gone through like a grant cycle and they realized all the paperwork that they have to have, because we do go out and monitor these people as well, then they've just not applied again. So.
And Commissioner Lehrman, I might add that it's probably not a very complex task once you've gone through it once, but it does require keeping a lot of records and keeping them in a manner that will facilitate the monitoring that Kristen just mentioned. I think that's where it gets difficult for, especially organizations that are short-staffed. It consumes a lot of time keeping the record straight and having everything you need. But I don't, per se, it's not that complex. It just is tedious.
Gotcha. Another question I have too is on page 3. So at the very top where it says community, neighborhood, and economic development, and then reading it across. So the percent complete is 542.27% complete. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Does that mean you're past into the next phase, or that there was some additional funding that you were able to do more than originally anticipated?
So those totals that you're seeing, they are for the last 3 years. So we have to do a comp plan every 5 years. And so those are totals that started in 2020. So it'll have like expected and then what our actual is and then the percentage. So this year, our actual was 58,000 for 2022. So we've already exceeded what we were anticipating for public facility infrastructure activities for the comp plan, which is 5 years.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it. And that is all.
This Commissioner Torres, I was just, maybe to follow up on Commissioner Lehrman's question, what might be helpful, I guess, maybe as we go forward and keep looking at this, to evaluate, kind of similar to the comment made earlier too, is could we break up this, how we look at this, maybe by like maybe our progress on the 5-year plan, and then maybe what our annual process or progress is. That way we can kind of differentiate, because it is kind of a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so when I come back to you guys with the applications, it'll actually have that information in there, because they put that information in their application of what they are anticipating for the next year. So, or 2023 though, we've already done those applications because HUD is a year behind. So when I come to you in June, it's gonna be for 2024. But I can break it out for you by what the 5 years is and then what it is for each year, so.
Okay, for clarification then, so right now, are we looking at progress against the total for the 5 years?
Yeah, so that's what
Okay.
that is right there that you
Okay.
have, so where we're at in the 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And then, sorry, just want to make sure I'm understanding right. And so where it says like expected strategic plan, that column, is that where we thought we would be at the end of the 5 years, or just for the annual?
Just for the annual.
Okay.
Thank you. The other thing, I think to Commissioner Lerman's comment is, I think maybe it is kind of incumbent on the nonprofits and 501c3s as they do this, because grant writing is a bit of an art and a bit of a practiced art, if that. And so I think the more, I don't know if there's ways that, and I don't know that it's the city's responsibility, but if there were ways that they could help them educate the process or get them together with somebody that's done it. Like I know the nonprofits that I'm on the board on, our executive director, one of them is just a master at this, right? And so she looks at this and it's not intimidating, but others would be really intimidated by the HUD process. So I don't know that it's our responsibility as a city, but it seems like matchmaking or just helping them say, hey, this is not so bad, go talk to these guys or whatever.
Yeah, and in the application, it does say that if they need technical assistance, they can reach out to me and I can give them some guidance of how they should word things or how they should break it up.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or feedback from commissioners? Well, this is a public hearing item, so I will open the public hearing. And if you have wish to speak on this particular item, now's the time to come forward and speak and state your name and city of address for the record. I know that we have no one in the room here, but is there anyone online? All right, we have no one online or in the room to speak on this item, so I will call two more times for public comment. And a final time for public comment. And with that, we will close the public hearing for this item. And there's no actions, no motions, so I think, oh, there is? I didn't see that anywhere here. What is the action we are needing? Is it a
Just that
approval?
you close the public hearing and recommend that the city manager sign off on the report so we can submit it to HUD.
Okay. I would entertain a motion signing off or approving the report and recommending the city manager sign off on the report. Is that what we're asking for, approval, motion? Rick is looking too. Yeah, if you point us to a page, if there was a motion, I just missed it in the, oh, there it is. It's on this, it's a very first memo page, the back, there's the motion. So I'd entertain that motion if somebody wants to make it.
I move the planning commission close the public hearing and recommend the city manager approve the 2022 consolidated annual plan evaluation report as presented.
I second.
All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Moffett, seconded by Commissioner Hendler. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Let record show that it passed unanimously. Thank you. Alrighty, I think the next thing on the agenda, we have no more public hearing items, so we have a workshop item, which is a report on the Housing Action and Implementation Plan. So I will turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. You heard a brief presentation about Pasco's first ever Housing Action and Implementation Plan. The City of Pasco is one of several communities across the state that applied and received grant funding from the Washington State Department of Commerce to produce a housing action plan. The intent of the plan is to be an actionable policy document that outlines how to meet Pasco's housing needs, be based on data and analysis grounded in inclusive and robust public opportunities and process, and providing a comprehensive roadmap to implement the effective and feasible housing strategies tailored to the community here in Pasco. So really it's taking a lot of what we've been involved with over the past several years, particularly over the last year, and putting that into a document and a planning effort that can actually be implemented. So we're really looking at that implementation piece in particular for Pasco's effort. Next slide, please. So it kind of a fun graphic, I guess, but the intent is to kind of show how this aligns with the rest of Pasco's efforts. And although it's not listed and identified here, a lot of the work that's done by the Community Development Block Grant Program, we're going to begin to sort of blend as much as we can and align all of these efforts to take full advantage of our resources here at the City of Pasco. So the intent of the Housing Action Plan is to inform our comprehensive plan and vice versa, particularly with the housing elements, the capital facilities element, and certainly the land use element. And although it was only a couple of years ago that we adopted our major comprehensive plan, staff will be back before you within the next year, beginning to lay the groundwork for the development of our next major update of the comprehensive plan, which will have an out year, a horizon year of 2045. Next slide, please. So this graphic just identifies the plan requirements based on the grant itself for the Department of Commerce and the process itself. So there's a housing needs assessment, and typically what's in a housing needs assessment is population and employment trends, looking at demographic data, socioeconomic data, existing and projected housing needs for all income levels, and that's certainly a state requirement that's new. And the intent of that is typically what happens is, and we did this in our last comprehensive plan effort, which was we knew that we were growing by a projected 40 or so thousand residents by the year 2038. And so we projected that we would need roughly 16 to 17,000 new housing units by the year 2038. That really isn't a real measurement of what we really need. We don't need 17,000 apartments, and we don't need 17,000 single-family detached homes. We need a variety of each to meet that overall target. And so that's the intent of that assessment, along with updating our land capacity analysis for those in the commission that remember that effort associated with the urban growth area application. A lot of work on the community and stakeholder engagement, particularly speaking with residents that are impacted by the housing challenges that they're facing here in the City of Pasco, and also working with our developers, our realtors, our nonprofit groups, our advocacy organization, and also our partner agencies such as the Health District, Ben Franklin Transit, Community Action, Care, and a few others that are impacted by the challenge of housing in our community. The housing policy framework, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this because we've actually completed a lot of the housing needs assessment, and we're always doing the community engagement effort, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. But within the housing policy framework review, that's where we're spending a lot of our time, in particular because Pasco has actually moved quite ahead in terms of where we've made some aggressive actions on housing. This Planning Commission certainly remembers the adoption of 3 code amendments associated with House Bill 1923. Those were completed last year. We started those in 2019. It is likely that other communities that are working on their housing action plan like we are, those are the recommendations from those plans, is that they should take the actions that Pasco completed last year. So in many respects, Pasco's actually ahead because we took those really aggressive changes and made those last year. One of them in particular regarding accessory dwelling units, we just published our user's guide available to members of the community in both Spanish and English. We have well over a dozen ADUs in the permitting review timeline right now in the city of Pasco, which is really showing that not all of the recommendations or code amendments, it's not a one-size-all-fits-all approach, that you need a little bit of all of them. And in Pasco's particular case, residents are really taking advantage of the ADUs, so that's a success story for us. Also want to call out that one of the efforts associated with the framework review is evaluating the barriers that still remain to achieving housing affordability, housing attainability, housing flexibility, et cetera. And that's going to encompass the review of our development regulations, although we've done quite a bit of that, including the residential design standards, which this commission recommended back in late 2022. Those will be in front of council within the next month. Essentially, that was a zoning code rewrite that we were able to accomplish, at least through the Planning Commission, in 1 year. Those are other, that effort itself would be one that is recommended by other communities. And so we're, again, ahead of the game, I think confidently can say that. Along with reviewing existing development regulations that could use some refinements and tweaks, certainly there will be a hard look at permitting, our review timelines, impact fees and fee structures, trying to look at anything else we can to really identify where changes or slight refinements can be made to make that process a little bit easier to get housing available for folks. Certainly a housing strategy development, how we're going to implement these things, and then state requirement about minimizing displacement, and then certainly how are we going to implement and then monitor our progress over the next several years. And the comprehensive plan that we'll bring to you over slowly, but certainly over the next 2.5 to 3 years, we'll have a lot of that information in there. Next slide, please. Again, highlighting some of the progress already made. You're aware, obviously, of the House Bill 1923 code amendments that essentially re-allowed missing middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, really opened up our zoning code, including ADUs, with a lot of flexibility. We were one of a few communities, very few communities actually, at least in this part of the state, that took advantage of the sales and use tax credit, which is monies directed back to the city of Pasco, that we can use for affordable housing or to support the construction of new housing, maintenance, rehabilitation. And that's one where I think between the Community Development Block Grant Program could take advantage and try to use our resources efficiently to make some exciting projects happen. I think this Commission's aware that over the last several years, the city's been fortunate to have been selected to work with the New York University Furman Center of Housing and the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to really get into the policy analysis of good housing policy, removing barriers, identifying new ones, and also the relationship between housing and public health. And we're going to be able to take advantage of all that and the wealth of data that we were able to collect through those efforts as part of the Housing Action Plan. And we are about 80% done, complete, working with a really great team out of the New York University Wagner School on anti-displacement and anti-displacement policies and how to fund affordable housing. So they're helping us, really leading a significant effort to identify which policies make the most sense for us in Pasco. They'll certainly provide us with all of the potential policy recommendations, but they'll break it down based on our local needs in the context here in Pasco about which ones are a little bit more realistic and attainable for us versus others. And we'll have the results of their work, which will feed the Housing Action Plan by the end of April. So on the next slide, we held in December of 2022 our first of 2 or 3 housing stakeholder workshops, and it was the intent of the city and our consultant team to make sure that we really reached out to a broad group of stakeholders. So we didn't want it to be one-sided, and we wanted it to ensure that there was the voices of many were represented. And I think you can see on the list of those that were in attendance at this meeting that we had a great diversity of folks representing both private, the realtor side, community land trusts, nonprofits, advocacy organizations, government partner agencies such as Ben Franklin Transit, and chambers. There is one area where certainly there needs to be improvement, and that would be the voice from our large employers who are certainly impacted by the housing challenges here. On the next slide, wanted to summarize, and this was attached to your staff report, but wanted to pull out some of the feedback we heard, and it really was an open dialogue and forum at the meeting in December. But we wanted to share what those stakeholders were telling us at the city about the current conditions. And it was evident that chronic homelessness is an issue here in Pasco. We heard we heard a lot of things that we don't typically hear, but that we need to, for instance, that hotels are serving as permanent housing for many, but there's no way to actually quantify that. There's no starter homes available in Pasco. It's forcing residents to leave. Housing insecurity for students in the K through 12 system, increasing concern for students and student renters. That there's an affordable housing crisis in Pasco that our current wages simply cannot support. So, and also on the regulatory side, that the impact of regulations can be problematic for housing. So we heard a variety of concerns, and it'll be our intent to try to address these as best we can in the Housing Action Plan. On the next slide, we wanted to summarize some of the things that we need and some of the other challenges we're facing. So one big thing that's coming up quite a bit with all the industrial growth that Pasco is experiencing is workforce housing. What is workforce housing? And how is it defined? Who is the workforce? I would consider that the city of Pasco, all of us are the workforce. So what does that mean for us at the city of Pasco? Certainly for those new employees at Amazon and Dairy Gold, et cetera. The need to address housing and transportation accessibility together. So be more comprehensive in our policy development. The need for more community land trust, the need for tenant protection laws, the need to simply increase access to stable housing. And again, that's where we can take advantage of some of the work Kristen's doing on the community development block program to make sure to align the allocation of those funds with rehabbing housing units to make sure that they're able to stay in a habitable manner that remains in the cycle of availability. And so this will be, again, things that is our intent to address in the Housing Action Plan. On the next slide, mentioned that we've completed a lot of our housing existing conditions or data, what's the current housing trends, and we've shared a lot of that over the last 2 years with the Planning Commission, but wanted to pull out just a few of those tidbits. For example, our analysis indicates that smaller households with less than four people have increased over the last decade. So the amount of folks living in each household that's decreased is increasing. There's an increase in the age of the householders themselves and a decrease in the householders that are younger, which may mean that it's difficult for younger households to get into housing ownership, home ownership. A scary number, and that more than half of our renters who are seniors are cost burdened, meaning that they are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And 5% of all of our households are severely overcrowded. Maybe that's why our ADU program in Pasco is becoming successful, but wanted to share a few tidbits that we've pulled out so far from some of our data work with the housing plan. On the next slide, this is a graphic that I think this Planning Commission is well aware of, but just the rapid growth in Pasco. And so today we sit just around 82,000 residents, and by the year 2038, 2040, Pasco will be home to well over 120,000 residents. The Washington State Office of Financial Management is working with the Washington State Department of Commerce to issue draft projections for each county. And Pasco typically has made up 80% of Franklin County's total population, and that percentage will just increase because Pasco certainly is outgrowing at a faster rate smaller communities in Franklin County. And I looked this up before the meeting, but the estimated population at the medium growth target, which historically Franklin County has exceeded, but by the year 2045, which will be our comprehensive plan horizon year, Franklin County will be home to well over 145,000 residents. So a lot of growth coming our way over the next several decades. On the next slide, Just summarizing some next steps. We are finalizing a public survey that'll be out within the next couple of weeks. That'll be out for members of the community, those that work in housing, those that are impacted by housing, an opportunity for them to provide some input. We'll use the results of that survey along with the data collection, et cetera, to help us facilitate a second housing stakeholder workshop, which will likely take place on May 1st here at City Hall. And then we expect a draft plan in the late spring, early summer, probably May is when we expect to have that before the Planning Commission. So just wanted to provide another high-level overview, and then the next several meetings about the plan will have a lot more data, maps, graphics, et cetera, to share with the Planning Commission. So that concludes this presentation, and happy to answer any questions I can this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions or feedback for staff on this report?
It's Commissioner Lehrman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Gonzalez, excellent job on those fun graphics. Seriously, let's take a moment to celebrate that. Those were really excellent. Thank you very much. Second, in my classroom, I've heard of high schoolers talking about their families building UDAs and how much that is offering opportunities for them and their families. And so I wanted to share that out with the commission. So we're doing good work. We're doing really good work, and you guys are too. And so thank you for all the guidance, the excellent job you guys are doing compiling together this information and providing it for us. This is exciting steps are taken for allowing our community to continue to live, work, and play here in Pasco.
Thank you, Commissioner Lehrman. Others? I had a quick question on the survey. I think one of the questions that's come up in the past is the mediums and modalities of the survey in terms of how we're getting out the survey and whether it's getting out to enough different mediums and audiences and hitting the right demographics and all that. Is, what's our plan for the survey?
You're going to see a lot of, certainly we're going to advertise on our typical social media pages and try to get that throughout our own networks. But you're really going to see this survey available at Tri-City Community Health, at Ben Franklin Transit bus stops or their transit centers, at community health facilities, at the Housing Authority building, at the Downtown Pasco Development Authority office. The intent is really to collect information from the community members themselves, and we've been pretty evident from a staff perspective to make sure that we don't have many opportunities, first, to receive state funding, and second, to produce a plan like this. And there's certainly an urgency behind the housing crisis that many communities are facing. And so it's our intent to make sure that we get as much value from a limited opportunity as we can. So I would expect to see this hopefully everywhere.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's just also just trying to figure out what are the places that the different demographics would go to. Like I know we have a Pasco app, right? But I don't know how many people use the Pasco app. I've got it on my phone. I look at it every once in a while, but whether that's a medium you can use for this, I don't know. But so that's good. Any other questions or feedback on this?
This is Commissioner Lehrman again.
Go ahead.
Mr. Gonzalez, what is the definition of younger residents? So you had a number for the older population.
Yeah, we do have a number. It's not in the presentation of the staff report, but we can be sure to bring that to you at the next meeting. I believe it was 35 and younger.
It's like 35 to 18. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. I think on our agenda, that was the last thing in workshop. Do we have any other business? No? Okay. Well, with that, then I would go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:15 PM. Thank you, everybody.